Hey, hello, welcome back. So to kind of finish up Unit 1, we are going to talk a little bit about the other types of crime. So we covered in the last video both violent and property crimes, and in this video we'll talk a little bit about white-collar crime, organized crime, cybercrime, hate crimes, and domestic terrorism. So white-collar crime refers to nonviolent, financially motivated crimes that are committed by individuals or organizations for financial gain, often by people in positions of trust or power. These offenses include things like fraud, embezzlement, bribery, insider trading, and money laundering. White-collar crimes are characterized by deceit and concealment rather than the use of physical force, and they can have significant negative impacts on economies and individuals. The kind of estimated global losses related to white-collar crime are around $300 billion, with 90% of those cases just completely going undetected. So people are stealing money from other people without being noticed. Really the big thing to remember here is these are not violent crimes at all. It's simply the handing off of funds in some capacity. So again, those really common types of white-collar crime include fraud, which is when you deceive somebody to get some sort of financial gain. So there's insurance fraud, securities fraud, consumer fraud. So just faking some sort of claim or faking something about who you are to get money out of an organization typically, right? Then we have embezzlement. So that is when funds are misappropriated to somebody that's trusted, or are misappropriated by somebody that is a trusted individual. Usually that's going to be higher ups, people higher up in a company, like executive staff, or perhaps even people in the accounting firm or whatever. They have access to the numbers, they're able to move money around perhaps without it being noticed immediately, right? So it's just when money is being used inappropriately. So this could be if you start a bunch of LLCs and then hire all of your LLCs to do some contract work or something for the company you work for without having any type of bid process or anything like that. So you are hiring yourself, paying yourself extra money for services maybe you will provide, but maybe not, right? You have corporate fraud, which occurs kind of at that larger scale, at the corporate scale, by corporations, including accounting fraud and other regulatory violations. And then insider trading, which is when you're using confidential information for stock trading advantages, which violates your fiduciary duties. So if some of the stock bros know or have some knowledge that, oh, the price on the stock for Apple is going to tank tomorrow, and they let their friends know, and then their friends suddenly sell all of their shares in Apple, that is considered insider trading, right? You're using some knowledge that you shouldn't be privy to or that you shouldn't be able to take advantage of to increase your financial gain. Organized crime refers to continuing criminal enterprises that profit from illegal activities like drug trafficking, human trafficking, fraud, and extortion, often using corruption and violence to maintain their operations and protect their networks. These groups can be local, national, or international, utilizing complex structures and cross-border connections to facilitate their activities and hide from law enforcement. Some key motivations are monetary profit and fulfilling public demand for illegal goods and services, but political motives can be a reason for these groups as well, for some of them. Right, so most often I think you think of like drug trade operations, but ultimately it's a criminal enterprise, a whole criminal system that's organized, right, to meet some financial end goal. Ultimately, the estimates are that for the global drug market alone, it's worth about $400 billion. And there's an estimated 150 plus active cartels worldwide. So pretty common. It doesn't have to be like a huge, massive cartel, right? They can be smaller scale, but ultimately doing or facilitating that kind of similar criminal or the same criminal enterprise. So the key characteristics of organized crime include a leadership hierarchy. So there are bosses and then underbosses that control the overall operations, and they're making decisions, right, to promote as much monetary gain as possible. There are the need for distribution networks, so they have these complex smuggling routes that include things like hidden compartments, involving corrupt officials, and just like overall a really sophisticated logistics system, right? When you think about how detailed and how much work it takes to be successful in this type of enterprise, it's amazing, truly. And it's amazing to think of like, wow, I wonder what you could accomplish in a legitimate, like quote unquote, legitimate business kind of enterprise, right? Oftentimes it includes things like laundering the money that they have gained through these criminal ventures, right? So they'll use like shell companies, investing in real estate and cryptocurrency to clean their money that they're gaining via their criminal activity. And ultimately they use violence to control and kind of maintain their territories and eliminate competition from rival groups, right? So they're inflicting violence to stay in power in their areas or to keep people in their group in line. Cybercrime is any illegal activity carried out using computers or the internet. The internet has drastically changed our economy and how the world does business with a global increase in online services and our steadily growing reliance on digital devices. Cybercriminals have a wealth of information at their disposal and can use it for illegal purposes. Cybercriminals can be rogue individuals who are working alone, or they can be part of organized crime groups or state-sponsored entities. They use technology to their advantage, hiding behind the anonymity of the internet and cryptocurrencies to threaten public safety and our national and economic security. Cybercrime is an extremely profitable borderless crime, right? Cyber threat actors generate billions of dollars in revenue each year, making cybercrimes one of the most lucrative criminal enterprises. It can also leave behind devastating consequences related to lost time, services, opportunities, and inflicting damage on people's reputations. Not all cyber attacks are aimed at stealing money. Some cybercriminals conduct cyber attacks to disable, disrupt, or control computer systems, or to change, delete, or steal data. Their motivation can range from petty theft to acts of war or terrorism. To combat this growing threat, people and organizations must be vigilant and take proactively take steps to proactively protect themselves from cybercrime. Cybercrime's financial toll is staggering, with estimates running into the hundreds of billions of dollars annually in the US alone, and $1 to $10 trillion globally per year or annually. However, the consequences extend beyond just monetary loss, right? It often leads to unauthorized release of protected personal information, decreased efficiency in emergency response due to compromised systems, and widespread price gouging in the wake of digital attacks. These incidents erode public trust, and they also have the potential to re-victimize people for years as stolen data circulates in the kind of dark corners of the internet, right? So, like I said before, just like incomprehensible amount of money per year that is lost via cybercrime, with about 43% of all businesses being affected. There are all kinds of different types of cybercrime. So there's simple identity theft, right, where someone steals your personal information from you via phishing attacks. They might try to take your card information or banking information and use it or sell that to other people. There are like hacking and malware types of cyber crimes where ransomware attacks are used to affect critical infrastructure. So that might be at corporate levels or at the government level. And then cyber terrorism, which is like critical infrastructure targeting. It usually has political motivations and some sort of ideological goal at the end. So, you know, you have the simple identity theft all the way to cyber terrorism are all considered cyber crime. A hate crime is a traditional offense like murder, arson, or vandalism with an added element of bias. So for the purposes of collecting statistics, the FBI has defined a hate crime as a criminal offense against a person or property motivated in whole or in part by an offender's bias against race, religion, disability, sexual orientation, ethnicity, gender, or gender identity. Hate itself is not a crime, and the FBI is mindful of protecting freedom of speech and other civil liberties, but if you commit some type of crime that is solely motivated by or partially motivated by your hate, then you would be potentially prosecuted for a hate crime. Last year, there were 11,830 incidents reported of hate crime or hate crimes, so nearly 1,000 per month across the United States. And then from August 2020 to currently, based on the FBI's data, they estimate that about 56% of all of the hate crimes during that time period were racially motivated in particular. So we have our hate crime categories. We have the kind of racial and ethnic bias bases, right? So crimes that are targeting individuals based on their race, ethnicity, or national origin. Whoops. And that can include things like assault, intimidation, vandalism, institutional targeting and threats, right? Any of those that are rooted in some racial or ethnic bias you have against that group is going to be considered a hate crime. And then we have hate crimes based on religious or identity biases. So it's motivated by someone's hatred for a particular religious group or gender identity or gender. So if you attack a synagogue or a mosque, right, because you hate Jewish and Muslim people, that's a hate crime. If you attack people particularly who are part of the LGBTQIA plus community, that's a hate crime. All of those things, right? So if they can prove that your violence towards any of these classes of people are because of your bias against them or because of a hate or motivated by your hate for those groups, it is considered a hate crime. You would have to either admit it or there would need to be some other evidence, right? Like, a lot of people write manifestos. Not sure why. That's an excellent source of evidence for the police when you get caught. So, you know, if you write a manifesto and then target those groups, and your manifesto says that you hate, you know, Jewish people, or you hate Muslim people, or you hate gay people, or Latino people, like, all of those are going to be considered a hate crime as soon as they can confirm that's why you did it, right? So you're gonna get the hate crime charges, you're also gonna get charged with whatever violent or property, if it's arson, kind of attack you did. So could be hate crime plus arson, hate crime plus murder, hate crime plus assault, right? So those are our hate crimes. Domestic terrorism refers to violent criminal acts committed within the United States by individuals or groups to advance ideological goals without foreign direction or influence. These acts are intended to intimidate or coerce civilian populations or to influence government policy by mass destruction, assassination, or kidnapping. The FBI and Department of Homeland Security identify various categories of domestic terrorism, including racially or ethnically motivated violent extremism, which is violence that's driven by ideologies rooted in racial or ethnic bias, anti-government or anti-authority violent extremism, which is violence linked to opposition to government overreach or perceived illegitimacy, including against economic, social, or racial hierarchies, and other ideological motivations. This can include religious extremism, environmental extremism, or issues like animal rights and abortion. So all those things, depending on how you act about them, if you are trying to use violence to coerce some sort of policy change or to try to change the direction of some governmental change over or anything like that, if you are using violence to try to coerce people into doing what you want based on your ideology or views or whatever you are extreme about, that is going to be domestic terrorism. Currently, there are 357 active investigations into domestic terrorism, or things that would be considered domestic terrorism in the United States. And this kind of approach to, or labeling things as domestic terrorism, harkens back to the Oklahoma City bombings in 1995, where there were about 168 victims, right? So we've seen domestic terrorism evolve since then. So in 1995, Timothy McVeigh killed 168 people at the Oklahoma City bombing at a federal building. He was part of or engaging in anti-government kind of extremist violence. Over time, we've seen kind of ideological shootings, so mass shootings or active shooting events targeting specific groups based on either racist, religious, or political or politically extreme beliefs, right? So think like the Charleston shooting at the church, in particular stands out. There was one in Pittsburgh at a synagogue, so both religion based, right? Those types of motivations. Then we have this kind of like, as the internet has become more prominent and people are subject to kind of existing in vacuums online, hearing different rhetoric that maybe aligns a little bit with what they think, but then they just keep getting exposed to that, so it allows them to double down on particular beliefs, right? And they maybe become radicalized. So there are certain social media platforms in the kind of advent of encrypted messaging apps that facilitate extremist recruitment and planning of events nowadays. Some of the legal challenges faced by law enforcement as they try to address domestic terrorism is balancing free speech protections with prevention of ideologically motivated violence and extremism, right? Like, it's okay to say, I hate the government. It's okay to say, like, that is protected speech, right? That's protected by your right to free speech. So you can say, you can be hateful, you can have, like, legally, you shouldn't. It is a shame. But, like, legally, it is not a crime to think a certain way or to land somewhere on the, spectrum of ideology, either from middle to extreme in whatever direction. That is allowed. But if we know that kind of extremist discourse leads to or could lead to actual violence or acts of domestic terrorism, then do lawmakers or do law enforcement officers try to engage in kind of like policing those spaces? Like, that's a question, right? An issue to be faced by them as time continues on, where you have to balance that of where, yeah, maybe you exist in those chat rooms to watch what's going on as an investigator, to keep an eye on these groups, but you can't intervene or say anything or try to police what they're saying because they're engaging in speech that is protected, right? But, like, you can't just take away the chat rooms, you can't just take away the social media platforms, even though they might lead to this extreme, these extremist thoughts and also potentially acts of violence, right? So something to kind of just leave you with. If you have the solution for it, I would welcome you to share. If you have any thoughts about it, I would love to hear them, but it's a delicate balance, right, of protecting people's rights, individual rights, and also protecting the masses from individuals, right? Okay, with that, I think we are all wrapped up with these